Most people do not forgive. They perform forgiveness while secretly keeping the wound alive. They say the right words, try to be spiritual, try to be mature, but inside, the scene keeps replaying, and the other person still holds power over their peace. That is because the forgiveness you were taught is incomplete. It asks you to be noble while still believing the world outside you is the cause of your suffering. It asks you to release the person while keeping the perception that created the prison. Real forgiveness is not pretending nothing happened. It is seeing differently so deeply that the inner chain loses its reason to exist. Today, you will learn 5 truths that can change the way you forgive forever. Here is what most people do when they decide to forgive. They push the feeling down. They rehearse a kind thought about the person who hurt them. They tell themselves they are above it now, that they have chosen the higher road, that they have moved on. And for a few hours, maybe even a few days, it seems to work. Then something small happens. A word, a memory, a similar situation, and the entire interior architecture of resentment rises back up as though it never left. This is not forgiveness. This is suppression wearing the costume of spiritual maturity. It is the emotional equivalent of stuffing a burning coal into a sealed room and calling the room clean because you cannot see the smoke anymore. The wound is not resolved. It is compressed, and compressed wounds do not disappear. They wait. They shape perception from beneath the surface. They color every new relationship with the logic of the old injury. There is also a subtler version of false forgiveness, and this one is more dangerous because it feels enlightened. It is the version where you perform release without examining the identity underneath the pain. You say the affirmations, you journal, you breathe through it, you tell people you have healed, and all the while, the self-concept you are operating from, the self who was wronged, the self who deserved better, the self who is still quietly waiting for acknowledgement, remains completely intact. Real forgiveness does not decorate the wounded identity. It dissolves the identification that kept the wound central to who you are. Before this teaching goes any deeper, there is something you need to do right now. Not after this video. Not when you feel ready. Now. Bring one situation to the surface of your awareness. One person, one event, one moment from your past or present that still carries a charge when you think about it. You do not need to analyze it yet. You do not need to understand it. Simply allow it to be present as you listen. Let it sit in the room with you. This is not a casual exercise. What you are about to hear will move through you very differently if you have a real situation held in awareness. Abstract forgiveness is still philosophy. Forgiveness applied to a specific wound is where transformation actually becomes possible. The mind has a way of agreeing with teachings in theory while quietly exempting its own particular grudge from the teaching's reach. Do not let that happen today. Keep the situation present. You may notice something already happening inside you as you hold that situation in awareness. There may be a tightening, a subtle resistance, a voice that says this one is different, this one is justified, this one is the exception. Listen carefully to that voice. Do not argue with it. Do not suppress it. Simply notice that it is there. That voice is part of what this teaching is designed to address. And by the end of this video, you will understand exactly why it says what it says and where it is coming from. Now carry that situation with you as we go forward, not as a burden, as a lantern, because the specific resentment you are holding right now is not proof of your weakness. It is the precise location where your freedom is waiting to be recovered. The wound you have been unable to release is not your worst quality. It is the doorway this teaching is going to help you walk through. Stay with it, stay open, and listen carefully to what comes next. Think about how many times you have already revisited the moment that hurt you. Not once, not twice. Hundreds of times, maybe thousands. Every time your mind returns to the scene, every time you imagine what you should have said, every time you replay what they did or failed to do, you are not remembering the past. You are recreating it. You are running the original injury forward into the present moment with the full emotional weight of something happening right now. This is the first thing to understand about resentment. It is not a relationship with the past. It is a present moment activity. The event may have ended years ago. The person may be on the other side of the world, or the other side of a decision you made to remove them from your life. But the experience of being hurt, the contraction, the anger, the grief, the sense of violation, that is not in the past. That is alive in you right now. And it is alive because perception is actively sustaining it. The mind does not store resentment as a neutral archive. It stores it as a living story with a central character who was wronged and a world that allowed the wrong to happen. And every time you revisit that story, you are not just observing it, you are rehearsing an identity. You are practicing the self-concept of someone who was injured, someone whose trust was broken, someone who deserved something they did not receive. The repetition is not accidental. The ego has a reason for maintaining the replay. That reason is this. As long as the injury is real and vivid and active, the ego has a justification for its own existence. Your sense of separate self, the self who must protect, the self who must keep score, the self who must stay alert so this never happens again, requires the ongoing reality of a world that is dangerous and unfair. Resentment is not just pain. It is a maintenance system for a particular model of self. It keeps the wound available as evidence that the world is what the ego says it is. This is why intellectual forgiveness fails. You can decide, from the level of the thinking mind, that you choose to let something go, and the subconscious machinery, the deeper layer that is running the identity and the story, keeps the file open. It keeps the evidence active. It keeps the emotional charge alive because that charge is not just pain. It is information the ego is using to maintain its sense of itself. Until you address the level underneath the decision, the pattern will continue to repeat. Let us stay with this, because this is where most people lose their power, and it is also where most teachings fail them. When you feel pain about something that happened in the past, the feeling is real. Let there be no confusion about that. The pain is not imaginary. The feeling of betrayal, abandonment, injustice, cruelty, these are real interior experiences, and they deserve to be seen clearly. This is not about dismissing what you went through. This is about understanding what is generating the pain right now, in this moment, as you think about it. Here is the distinction that changes everything. The event happened. The event is over. What is generating the pain right now is not the event. It is the perception you are still holding about the event, the meaning you have attached to it, the identity you have organized around it, and the story you are actively maintaining about what it proved. The original cause was external. The current cause is internal. And that shift from external cause to internal cause is the most important distinction in this entire teaching. This is not about blaming yourself. Repeat that clearly in your mind. This is not blame. This is the recognition that if the state is being produced inside you, it can be changed inside you. That is not a punishment. That is a liberation. The moment the source of the experience is located inside your own perception, rather than locked inside someone else's behavior. The moment you stop needing them to change in order for you to change, something fundamental shifts in the architecture of your reality. When you feel resentment about what happened, you are experiencing yourself as the wounded identity. That identity is not your true self. It is a self-concept you adopted, in many cases necessarily, as a way of making sense of an experience that was genuinely painful. The wound shaped a story, and the story shaped an identity, and that identity now perceives the world through the lens of someone who has been hurt in that specific way. And because perception filters reality, the world keeps appearing to confirm what the wounded identity already believes. This is what Neville Goddard meant when he described the world as the outpicturing of an inner state. It is not that the people who hurt you do not exist. It is that your sustained perception of yourself as someone who has been permanently damaged by them keeps generating experiences that match that self-concept. The outer world is not stubbornly repeating your wound. Your inner world is persistently producing the conditions that reflect your wounded assumption about yourself and about life. This is the most confronting truth in this teaching, and it must be held carefully. Because the temptation here is to turn this into shame, and shame is not the destination. The destination is clarity. Clarity about where the maintenance of the wound is actually happening. Clarity about who is keeping the original injury alive, and why. Not because you are weak or damaged or spiritually failing, but because the ego does not surrender its organizing stories easily, and the wounded identity is one of the most powerful stories the ego knows how to protect. So here is the question that opens the real teaching. If the pain is being sustained by perception, and if perception is something operating inside you rather than something imposed on you by the other person's continued existence, then what exactly is forgiveness for? Who is it really serving? And more importantly, what would you actually have to release in order for the pain to stop? Most people enter the conversation about forgiveness still believing it is primarily about the other person. They ask whether the person deserves to be forgiven. They ask whether forgiveness means excusing what was done. They ask whether releasing the resentment is somehow a betrayal of what they went through. These are real questions. They deserve real answers, but they are all still pointing outward. They are all still locating the issue in the other person's actions, the other person's character, the other person's worthiness. And as long as the conversation stays out there, as long as forgiveness is framed as something you do toward another person, you will remain dependent on your assessment of that person in order to decide whether peace is available to you. You will remain a prisoner of a verdict about someone else. Your freedom will be conditional on your judgment of their guilt. And that, if you look at it clearly, means they still hold the key to your interior state. Here is what this teaching is going to establish with precision. Forgiveness is not primarily about the other person. Forgiveness is the withdrawal of a projection. It is the correction of a perception. It is the process by which you stop assigning causative power to the outer world and return to the inner cause that is generating your experience. The other person is not incidental to this process, but they are not the center of it either. You are. And the moment you understand this, the question transforms completely. It is no longer whether they deserve your forgiveness. It is whether you are willing to reclaim your own perception. It is whether you are ready to stop outsourcing your peace to the behavior, the apology, the change, or the consequence of someone outside you. That is a different question entirely. And that different question is what the next part of this teaching is built to answer. Truth number 1. Forgiveness changes your perception, not the facts. Listen carefully to this. because it is the foundation on which every other truth in this teaching rests. Forgiveness does not require you to rewrite history. It does not ask you to say that what happened was acceptable, or that the pain was not real, or that the other person was right. Forgiveness is a change in how you see, and how you see determines what you experience in the present moment far more powerfully than what actually happened in the past. The facts of what occurred can remain exactly as they are. The behavior happened. The words were said. The trust was broken. The harm was real. Forgiveness does not erase those facts. What it changes is the meaning you are assigning to those facts right now, in this moment, and the identity you are maintaining in relation to them. Facts are fixed. Meaning is chosen. And the meaning you are choosing right now is generating your present experience as surely as if the event were still happening. Truth number 2. Forgiveness releases an identity that was never your true self. The self who was hurt, the self who was wronged, the self who still holds the case open and the verdict undecided. That self is a construction. It was built in response to pain, and it served a purpose at the time. But it is not the deepest layer of what you are. Beneath the wounded identity is an awareness that was never actually damaged, an inner ground that the events of the outer world cannot truly reach. Forgiveness is the process by which you stop identifying with the construction and begin to recover the awareness underneath it. Truth number 3. Forgiveness returns causation to its source. As long as you hold resentment, you are operating from the belief that your interior state is caused by something outside you. You are operating from the belief that what they did is the reason you feel the way you feel. And in a surface level, sequential sense, that may feel completely true. But if the wound is still active years after the event, then something inside you is generating that experience right now. Forgiveness is the act of locating that inner generator and choosing differently at the level of perception, identity, and assumption. This is the teaching that Neville Goddard embedded throughout his work when he described revision, the practice of going back into the past event in imagination and revising it until the emotional charge releases. He was not asking you to pretend nothing happened. He was asking you to recognize that the version of the past you are carrying inside you is a living, active, present experience, and that it can be changed from the inside. The past does not have a fixed grip on you. Your current perception of the past does, and perception is always changeable. Think about what this means for the situation you are holding in your awareness right now. The other person may not have changed. They may never change. They may never apologize. They may not even acknowledge that anything happened. And yet your perception can still shift. Your experience can still transform, because your experience is not actually being generated by their behavior right now. It is being generated by the inner state you are maintaining in response to your memory and interpretation of their behavior. That is the location where change becomes possible. This is not passive. This is not resignation. This is radical inner authority. It is the recognition that the place where your suffering is being manufactured is also the place where it can be unmade. You do not need permission from the outside world to change your inner world. You do not need the other person to offer closure before you can experience peace. The closure is available the moment you stop waiting for the outer world to provide what only the inner cause can generate. Truth number 4. Forgiveness is an act of reclaiming inner power, not extending generosity to someone who wronged you. This reframing is essential. Most people approach forgiveness as though it is a gift they are reluctantly offering to someone who may not deserve it. That framing keeps the ego in charge because the ego is the one deciding who deserves what. Real forgiveness is not about the other person's worthiness. It is about your willingness to stop being governed by a perception that is keeping you in a state of interior contraction. It is about choosing your own freedom over the maintenance of a case against someone else. Truth number 5. Forgiveness is not an event. It is an ongoing return to perception. You may find yourself forgiving the same situation multiple times. The scene may return. The charge may resurface. This does not mean you failed. It means the subconscious has layers, and each return of the emotional echo is an invitation to go deeper into the perception beneath it. Every time you choose to see differently, you are weakening the inner command that has been generating the resentful state. The pattern releases incrementally. The grip loosens layer by layer, and each layer released is a layer of your own freedom restored. A Course in Miracles makes a statement that redefines forgiveness entirely. It says that forgiveness recognizes that what you thought your brother did to you has not occurred. Now, if you hear that statement the wrong way, it sounds like a denial of reality. It sounds like spiritual bypassing at its most extreme, like a teaching that asks you to pretend that harm never happened. But that is not what it means. To understand what it means, you have to understand the framework of perception that the Course operates from. The Course teaches that the world you see is a projection of the mind that is looking at it, not in a magical or metaphorical sense, but in a very specific psychological and spiritual sense. The meaning you assign to events, the categories you sort people into, the evidence you collect for your beliefs about yourself and the world, these are all productions of the perceiving mind. The raw data of experience passes through the filter of your beliefs, your self-concept, your wounds, and your assumptions, and what you experience as reality is always that filtered version. Always. What the Course calls forgiveness is the withdrawal of that projection. It is not saying that behavior does not exist. It is saying that the meaning you assigned to the behavior, the story you organized around it, the identity you built in response to it, those are the productions of your own mind, and they can be uncreated by your own mind. The other person did what they did. But who they are in your perception, the villain, the betrayer, the abandoner, the abuser, that character is assembled inside your mind and maintained by your ongoing attention to the story. When the Course says to forgive, it is asking you to look at the character you have constructed and recognize that the full weight of evil and causation you have assigned to them is something your own mind produced. Not to excuse what they did, not to deny the impact, but to recognize that your perception added layers of meaning, permanence, and identity to the event that are yours to withdraw. And when those layers are withdrawn, what remains is the fact without the story. And facts without stories do not have the same power to generate suffering. This distinction between the fact and the story is not subtle. It is the entire pivot point of what the Course calls the correction of perception. The fact, the behavior occurred. The story, this proves I am unlovable, or the world is unsafe, or I will always be abandoned, or people cannot be trusted, or I deserved this. The story is where the wound lives. The story is what forgiveness is asking you to examine, not the fact. The story that the ego built around the fact and has been using ever since to confirm its own worldview. The Course also makes a distinction that is critical for this teaching. It distinguishes between the error and the truth of what another person is. It teaches that all harmful behavior is a form of what it calls the call for love, an expression of inner pain and separation, rather than an expression of true power. or will. This does not mean you must agree with the behavior or allow it to continue, but it opens the possibility of seeing past the behavior to the suffering that generated it. And that shift in perception is not weakness. It is the correction that dissolves the charge. Now, you may resist this. You may feel that seeing the other person's behavior as an expression of their own suffering is letting them off the hook. And this is where the Course's teaching is most precise. It says clearly that seeing truly does not mean approving. It does not mean tolerating. It does not mean returning to a situation that was harmful. What it means is that you are choosing not to maintain a perception that keeps you imprisoned in their wrongness. You are choosing to see with the kind of vision that restores your own peace, not because they deserve peace, but because you do. The Course describes this kind of seeing as holy vision, not a supernatural experience, but a very natural one. The natural state of the mind before it organized its experience around fear, separation, and the ego's need for a coherent story of self and other. Holy vision is simply perception that is not distorted by the ego's constant need to assign blame, collect evidence, and maintain the reality of attack and defense. And forgiveness, in this framework, is the practice of returning to that undistorted seeing, one layer at a time. This is not passive, and it is not weak, and it is not denial. It is the most active, demanding, and ultimately liberating inner work available to you, because it asks you to look directly at the place where your mind has organized itself around injury, and to choose to see differently, not because the world has earned that choice, but because your own peace is worth more than the maintenance of a grievance that has never once delivered what it promised to deliver. Imagine that you are standing in a room. The room has been furnished with everything that confirmed the wound. The walls hold the evidence. The furniture is arranged around the injury, as though the injury is the central object in the space. Every piece of memory, every replayed scene, every rehearsed conversation, every verdict you reached, every time you explained to someone what happened and felt the familiar tightening in your chest, all of that is furniture in this room. And you have been living in this room for a very long time. The room is not entirely uncomfortable. This is important to understand. There is a strange familiarity to it. There is a kind of order to it. The ego knows where everything is. It knows the layout. It knows the story that the room tells about you and about the person who hurt you. Staying in the room feels, on some level, like stability. Leaving feels dangerous, not because what is outside the room is worse, but because the ego cannot see outside the room. All it knows is the room it built. Now imagine that there is a door in this room. The door is not obvious. It does not announce itself. It is not marked with a sign that says this way to freedom. It is simply there, at the edge of perception, and it has always been there. The door is not an escape from what happened. The facts of what occurred in the room are not erased when you walk through the door. What changes when you walk through the door is that you are no longer inside the room that was built to contain those facts. You are no longer living within the architecture of the wound. Forgiveness is not a decoration inside the room. This is one of the most critical distinctions in this entire teaching. When people perform forgiveness without changing perception, they are hanging new curtains in the same room. They are rearranging the furniture. They are placing spiritual objects around the evidence and calling the result healing. But the walls are still there. The central wound is still the organizing principle of the space. The room looks a little better, but you are still in it. The door out of the room is not opened by deciding the other person is good. It is not opened by pretending the injury did not happen. It is not opened by forcing yourself to feel warmth towards someone who caused you harm. The door is opened by changing your relationship to the story itself. By recognizing that the room was constructed by perception, maintained by perception, and can be exited through a shift in perception. The door opens from the inside. It always has. When you walk through the door, something very specific happens. The other person does not disappear. The facts do not disappear. But the charge disappears. The compulsion to return to the scene, to rehearse the verdict, to keep the wound activated as evidence for the ego's story about the world, that compulsion begins to lose its grip, not because you forced it to stop, but because you have stepped outside the architecture that gave it its reason to exist. Many people are afraid to walk through this door because they believe that exiting the room of resentment means abandoning their own experience. They believe that releasing the grievance is a form of self-betrayal, a statement that what happened was acceptable, that they are diminishing their own pain in order to seem evolved. Look at this closely. The door does not ask you to abandon your experience. It asks you to stop letting your experience of the past be the only room you are willing to live in. You can acknowledge what happened fully and completely, and still choose to no longer organize your present identity around it. The room is not your home. It became your home because it was where the wound happened, and the ego moved in immediately to manage the aftermath. But you were not born in that room. You did not arrive in this life to live permanently inside the perception of a specific injury. The room has a door. The door opens inward, which means it is opened by a choice made inside you, not a change made outside you. Forgiveness is the act of turning toward that door with full awareness of what you are leaving and full willingness to discover what exists on the other side. You have been in that room long enough. You know every corner of it. You know the weight of the furniture. You know the story the walls tell. And some part of you, the part that sought out a teaching like this one, already knows that the room is not all that exists. That part of you is already standing close to the door. What comes next is the practical understanding of how to open it. Here is the trap that almost everyone falls into when they decide they want to be free of resentment. They wait. They wait for the apology. They wait for the acknowledgement. They wait for the person to understand what they did and feel the appropriate weight of it. They wait for justice from the relationship, from the situation, from the universe itself. And while they wait, the wound remains fully active, fully present, fully in charge of their inner state. Because the waiting is not neutral. The waiting is a sustained declaration that the cause of your peace is outside you. Think about the mechanics of this. Every moment you spend waiting for an external correction to arrive before you allow yourself to feel peace, you are reinforcing the exact belief system that is keeping you imprisoned. You are practicing the identity of someone whose well-being depends on what happens outside them. And the subconscious, which learns through repetition, registers that practice as truth. It concludes that peace is conditional, that healing is something the outer world must grant, that you are the receiver of reality rather than its inner cause. This is not a spiritual abstraction. This is a practical observation about how the inner machinery works. The subconscious does not distinguish between what you want and what you rehearse. It responds to what you persistently dwell in. And if you are persistently dwelling in the state of someone who has been wronged and is waiting for correction, the subconscious will continue generating the perceptual experience that matches that state. The mirror will keep reflecting the unchosen condition back to you, because the unchosen condition is what the inner state is broadcasting. There is also a secondary dynamic that makes external waiting particularly stubborn. When you are waiting for someone to apologize or change, your ego receives a kind of secondary benefit from the wound. The grievance gives the ego a sense of moral authority. It provides a clear story of self and other, victim and wrongdoer, justified pain and unjust cause. The ego does not want to give up this clarity. A world without the grievance is a world where the ego's organizing story collapses, and that feels, to the ego, like annihilation. So it keeps waiting. It keeps holding the case open. It keeps monitoring the outer world for the sign that never comes. And this is why the people who hurt you the most can feel so impossibly close, even when they are completely absent from your life. Because the waiting keeps them present. Every time you review what they owe you, you invoke their presence in your inner world. Every time you imagine the conversation where they finally understand, you recreate them as a living character in your current experience. The distance in the outer world does not match the proximity in the inner world, because in the inner world, you have kept them exactly where the unresolved perception placed them. Justice is not an illegitimate desire. Let that be said clearly. The desire for acknowledgement, for accountability, for correction of harm, these are not spiritually wrong. There are situations where justice is genuinely appropriate and should be pursued through appropriate means in the outer world. But justice pursued in the outer world and inner peace generated in the inner world are two separate operations. You can pursue accountability externally and simultaneously withdraw the inner perception that is keeping you imprisoned. One does not cancel the other, but conflating them means your peace will always be held hostage to an outcome you cannot fully control. Watch what happens inside you as you hear this. Notice whether there is resistance to the idea that your peace does not have to wait for external correction. Notice whether something inside you insists that releasing the inner charge is premature, that it would be wrong to feel free before the situation is resolved in the outer world. That insistence is the voice of the ego protecting its story, and recognizing it as the ego's voice rather than as the voice of truth is the first move toward the door. So, what does it actually look like to forgive differently? Not as a performance, not as a spiritual exercise you complete and then forget, but as a real inner operation that shifts the perception and returns you to the state of peace that is your natural ground. This is where the teaching becomes practical. This is the part that cannot remain philosophy. The first step in the inner operation is observation without judgment. Before you can withdraw a projection, you have to see it. You have to become aware of what your mind has added to the raw facts of the situation. Sit with the scene you have been holding in awareness throughout this video. Do not try to change anything yet. Simply observe. Notice the story your mind is telling. Notice the character you have constructed out of the other person's behavior. Notice the identity you are inhabiting as you look at the scene. Not to criticize yourself for any of it, simply to see it clearly. You cannot release what you cannot see. The second step is the identification of the projection. Ask yourself with real honesty what meaning you assign to this event, not just what happened, but what your mind decided it meant about you, about the other person, about the world, about what you can expect from life and from people. These meanings are not neutral observations. They are inner commands. They are instructions the subconscious received and began to execute. The wound is painful, but the meaning layered on top of the wound is what the subconscious uses to generate ongoing experience. Identify the meaning. Bring it into conscious view. The third step is the recognition that the meaning is not the fact. the fact of what happened is real. The meaning you assign to it is a construction. This distinction must be held firmly, because the ego will insist they are the same thing. The ego will say that, of course, the meaning is accurate, that anyone who experienced what you experienced would draw the same conclusion, that the interpretation is simply the truth. But interpretations are never simply the truth. They are the ego's best attempt to make sense of experience using the framework it already has. And the framework the ego uses is always built around the protection of the separate self. The fourth step is the release of the identity. This is the deepest part of the inner operation. The wounded identity is not released by arguing yourself out of it. It is released by choosing to identify with a deeper layer of yourself than the story of the wound. Neville Goddard spoke about the state you are in as the governing reality of your experience. The state of the wounded self generates wounded experience. The state of the whole self, the self that was not ultimately destroyed by what happened, the self that survived and is here, now, listening to this teaching, generates a different experience entirely. You shift the state not by pretending the wound did not happen, but by choosing which layer of yourself to stand in as you look at what happened. The fifth step is the withdrawal of meaning from the other person's power. The other person cannot damage the deepest layer of what you are. What they damaged was a relationship, a trust, an expectation, a specific dimension of your life. Those damages may be real and significant, but they did not reach the ground of your being. They reached the ego and the ego's story. And the ego's story is not your permanent identity. As you withdraw the investment in their power to have fundamentally altered who you are at the deepest level, their figure in your inner world begins to shrink from a towering cause to simply a character in a story you are no longer required to live inside. The sixth step is the return to the present moment. Resentment is always a past tense experience being imported into the present. When you catch yourself rehearsing the scene, replaying the verdict, or waiting for the correction that will finally allow you to feel peace, you bring your attention back to the present moment deliberately, not as suppression, not as distraction, but as a conscious choice to locate yourself in the only moment where peace is actually available. The past cannot be changed. The future is not yet here. The present moment is where the inner state actually lives, and the present moment is always accessible. The seventh step is the repetition of the return. You will find yourself back in the room. The scene will replay. The charge will surface again. This is not failure. This is the nature of subconscious reprogramming. The old pattern has deep roots, and it will reach back through those roots as long as they exist. Each time you notice you have returned to the room, you practice the return to present perception again. Not with frustration, with the calm recognition that this is how the inner machinery is changed. Not by one dramatic breakthrough, but by consistent, patient, deliberate return to the seeing that does not sustain the wound. The eighth step is the maintenance of the new perception. Once you have begun to experience the release, even partially, even briefly, you protect it. You do not volunteer the story to people who will reinforce the wounded identity. You do not seek out conversations that rehearse the grievance. You begin to notice which inner environments and outer conversations invite you back into the room, and which ones honor the door you are learning to walk through. You begin to build the identity of someone who has stepped out of the old room, not because nothing happened, but because you have chosen something larger than the room as your dwelling place. The ninth step is the recognition that this is forgiveness. This is not a moral achievement. It is not evidence that you are spiritually superior. It is the very practical, very humble recognition that the perception you were holding was costing you more than it was protecting you, and that the peace available on the other side of that perception is not naive or dangerous or self-betraying. It is simply what becomes available when you stop insisting that the mirror must change before you are allowed to be free. At this point in the teaching, there is a very common objection that rises with force. It sounds like this: but what about serious harm? What about abuse? What about situations where forgiveness feels like it would minimize what was done? This objection is legitimate, and it must be met with precision and not with platitudes. There are situations that involved real, serious, sustained harm. There are situations where the other person's behavior was not simply a misunderstanding or a mistake born of their own pain, but a genuine violation that caused deep damage. Forgiveness in those situations is not simpler. It is not more straightforward. If anything, it is a longer, more patient, more layered process. But the principle does not change based on the severity of the harm. The principle is this: inner forgiveness, the withdrawal of the perception that is keeping you imprisoned in the wound, does not require you to excuse the behavior, minimize the impact, return to the relationship, or pretend that accountability is irrelevant. You can pursue appropriate external accountability with full strength and simultaneously work on releasing the inner charge. These are not opposing actions. They are simply operating on different levels. What happens outside you and what you choose to carry inside you are separate questions. The difference between forgiveness as a spiritual practice and forgiveness as a psychological tool is that the spiritual version understands that carrying the wound forward does not correct the harm that was done. It only extends it. Every day that the wound remains central to your identity is another day the original harm continues to have consequence in your life, not because the other person is still doing something to you, but because the inner state you are maintaining is still generating the experience of being someone to whom that harm is the defining reality. Another objection that frequently arises is the fear that releasing the resentment means losing the protection it provides. There is a belief, often not fully conscious, that staying angry keeps you safe. That the grievance is a warning system that will prevent the same thing from happening again. That if you let go of the charge, you will become vulnerable to the same wound. Look at this closely. Resentment does not actually protect you. It keeps you alert to the category of person or situation that caused the original harm. But that alertness is not discernment. It is a fear-based scanning system that often creates the very dynamics it is trying to prevent. Real protection comes from clear perception, from healthy boundaries, from genuine self-respect, none of which require the maintenance of a wound to function. There is also the question of timing. Even when you understand the teaching completely, even when you feel genuinely willing to shift the perception, you may find that the emotional charge does not immediately release. This is normal. This is not evidence that the teaching is wrong or that it does not work for you. The subconscious operates on its own timing, and the layers of a deep wound do not dissolve in a single sitting. What you are doing in this practice is changing the inner command. You are issuing a new instruction to the subconscious. But the old architecture does not vanish immediately. It releases gradually as the new perception is consistently chosen, as the return to the room is consistently met with the choice to step back through the door. The delay between the inner shift and the felt release is not failure. It is the processing time of a system that was built over years and is being gently, persistently asked to reorganize. Hold this with patience. The absence of immediate relief does not mean the inner work is not happening. It means the subconscious is processing at the depth that the wound actually reaches. Stay in the practice. Keep returning to the perception of the one who is not ultimately defined by what happened. The felt release will follow the inner choice, but it follows on its own schedule. Finally, there is the question of what to do with the other person in your life going forward. This teaching is about the inner operation of forgiveness. It is not a prescription for how to manage the outer relationship. Whether you re-engage with the person, maintain distance, set boundaries, or remove them from your life entirely, those are decisions that belong to practical wisdom and are not negated by inner forgiveness. You can completely release the inner charge and still choose not to have the person in your life. The inner and the outer are not the same decision. Inner peace and outer wisdom are not in conflict. They are meant to operate together. You came into this teaching with a situation held in awareness, and across the last 45 minutes, 5 truths have moved through that situation with the intention of changing how you see it. Let us gather those truths now, not as a list to memorize, but as a landscape to inhabit. Because the goal was never information. The goal was always transformation. The first truth is that forgiveness changes your perception, not the facts. What happened is real. What you do with the meaning of what happened is your choice. And that choice, made consistently at the level of perception, is the only place where genuine freedom begins. The facts remain. The story is yours to revise. The second truth is that forgiveness releases an identity that was never your true self. The wounded self is a construction that was built in response to pain and has been maintained by the subconscious as the organizing center of your experience of reality. But beneath that construction is an awareness that was never damaged. Forgiveness is the recovery of that awareness, not the denial of the wound. The third truth is that forgiveness returns causation to its source. Your peace is not a hostage to the other person's behavior, their apology, their change, or their punishment. The inner state that generates your experience of reality lives inside you, and it can be changed inside you. Responsibility here is not punishment. It is the door out. The fourth truth is that forgiveness is an act of reclaiming inner power, not extending generosity to someone who wronged you. When you forgive from this understanding, you are not giving something to the person who hurt you. You are taking something back for yourself. You are reclaiming the inner authority that was temporarily surrendered to the belief that they held the cause of your suffering. The fifth truth is that forgiveness is not an event. It is an ongoing return to perception. It does not happen once. It is practiced. It is returned to. It is chosen again each time the old room reasserts itself. And each time you choose the door over the room, you are weakening the architecture that kept you inside. Layer by layer, the grip releases. Layer by layer, the state changes. And as the state changes, the mirror begins to reflect something new. Something has shifted in you during this teaching. You may not be able to name it precisely yet. You may feel the familiar charge around your situation beginning to soften, or you may feel resistance rising more strongly than before, because that is also what happens when real teaching meets real ego. Either way, something moved. And the part of you that is not the wounded identity, the part that sought out this teaching, the part that stayed through the difficulty of what was said here, that part deserves to be acknowledged and strengthened. There is a practice in the work of inner transformation that involves anchoring the new perception in language, not because language creates the shift, but because language can hold the shift in place while the subconscious catches up. When you speak a truth about who you are from the fulfilled state, from the healed identity, from the perspective of someone who has stepped through the door, you are giving the subconscious a new inner command. You are practicing the identity rather than waiting for the identity to arrive. Right now, in the comments of this video, write a single sentence that declares who you are from the other side of the old perception. Not who you hope to become, who you are choosing to be right now as you leave this room and step through the door. The sentence can be simple. It should be honest. It should feel like a slight stretch, the way truth always does when it is larger than the story you were told about yourself. You might write something like, "I am no longer defined by what was done to me," or "My peace does not depend on what they do or do not do," or "I release the projection and return to the inner cause." Whatever feels true and alive for you, whatever matches the specific wound you brought into this teaching and the specific liberation you are choosing as you leave it. Your comment is not just for you. It is for every person who scrolls past this video and reads what you wrote in the place where their own courage has not yet caught up with their desire. Your declaration of perception, your refusal to keep the old identity as the governing story of your life, is a contribution to the field of consciousness that this channel is here to tend. Write it, mean it, and then return to it the next time the old room tries to pull you back. Do not make the comment a performance. Make it a genuine inner statement that you happen to write in public. That combination of sincerity and visibility is part of the practice. You are not claiming to be finished. You are claiming the direction. And the direction is what the subconscious registers. The direction is what the mirror eventually reflects. Write from where you are going, not from where you have been. There is someone you know, maybe yourself at a different point, maybe someone in your life right now who has said the words, "I forgive you," or "I have let it go," or "I am over it," and has felt the scene begin replaying before the sentence was finished, who has tried to be noble, tried to be spiritual, tried to be mature, and found that the wound simply would not stay in the past where it was supposed to belong. That person was not failing. That person was using the only tool they had been given, and that tool was incomplete. Today, you were given a different tool, not a better attitude, a different perception. The mirror does not negotiate. It reflects the inner state with perfect, impersonal accuracy. What you have been seeing in your outer world, in your relationships, in the patterns that keep returning, in the people who keep appearing with the same energy in different forms, is not evidence of a hostile world. It is the faithful return of an inner broadcast. And the broadcast can change. Not by fighting the reflection, not by waiting for the reflection to apologize, not by decorating the room where the wound lives, but by walking through the door, by withdrawing the projection, by choosing the perception that restores your inner authority. That is forgiveness. And today, for the first time, or perhaps for the first time, this clearly, you understand what it actually is. The teaching does not end here. What you experienced in this video is one layer of a much deeper work. Because beneath forgiveness lives another question, which is the question of who the ego is and why it fights so hard to keep you in the room. The ego does not cling to resentment by accident. It clings because the resentment is evidence of separation, and separation is the ego's home. In the next teaching, we are going to go directly into the architecture of the ego, why it protects suffering, how it disguises itself as your best interests, and what becomes possible when you begin to see it clearly for what it is. If this teaching reached something real in you, if it shifted something even slightly, if it gave language to something you have sensed but could not yet articulate, then stay close to this channel. What we are building here is not a collection of videos, it is a map of the inner cause. And you have just crossed the first threshold.